Today we're diving into the 2026 Senate race in the United States, with a detailed look at the latest America First Insight forecast. While most states are locked in for one party or the other, there are a few that are truly competitive, and could decide control of the chamber. We'll go through the numbers, the odds, the candidates, and the unique political dynamics in each race so you know exactly where things stand heading into the midterms. Let's start with Georgia, one of the most hotly contested Senate races in the country. The forecast gives Democrats 50.3% of the projected vote, with Republicans at 49.7%, a margin of just 0.6 of a point. That translates to a 55.8% chance of a Democratic hold and 44.2% for a Republican flip. Incumbent Democrat Jon Ossoff is seeking a second term after first winning in 2021 during Georgia's surprise shift toward the Democrats. Since then, the state has gone narrowly blue in Senate contests but remains highly competitive in statewide races. The Republican primary is crowded, featuring Congressman Buddy Carter, known for his alignment with the Trump wing of the party, Congressman Mike Collins, a vocal conservative from the state's 10th district, and former University of Tennessee football coach Derek Dooley. The GOP will likely spend big here, hoping to return Georgia to the red column after Democrats flipped both Senate seats in the last decade. Georgia's changing demographics, with fast-growing Atlanta suburbs leaning blue, are colliding with strong Republican turnout in rural areas, making this a true toss-up. Next is Michigan, an open seat race after Democrat Gary Peters announced he won't seek another term. The numbers here give Republicans 50.52% to Democrats 49.48%, and are +1 margin, with a 58.8% chance of a Republican win. Michigan has been trending toward tighter contests in recent cycles. Peters himself barely won re-election in 2020, and while Democrats have carried the state in recent presidential elections, statewide races remain competitive. On the Democratic side, State Senator Mallory McMorrow has built a profile as a progressive with strong fundraising appeal. Congresswoman Haley Stevens has positioned herself as a centrist who can win suburban voters, and former Detroit Health Director Abdul El-Sayed, who ran for governor in 2018, is also in the mix. For Republicans, former Congressman Mike Rogers has stepped forward as the early frontrunner. A former FBI agent and Intelligence Committee chair, Rogers brings a national security background that could appeal to swing voters. Michigan's economy, particularly auto industry concerns and union influence, will be a major factor in how this race plays out. Over in New Hampshire, we have another open seat, as Democrat Jeanne Shaheen is retiring after serving since 2009. The forecast has Democrats at 50.89% and Republicans at 49.11%, a D+1.8 margin, giving Democrats a 66.4% chance of holding on. New Hampshire's political climate is famously independent, with voters often splitting their tickets. The state leans blue in presidential years but has elected Republican governors for most of the last decade. Candidate fields are still forming, but expect both parties to look for nominees who can appeal to moderates and independents. Issues like energy costs, housing affordability, and opioid addiction could dominate the debate here. Because of New Hampshire's small size and relatively low campaign costs, this race could see intense retail politicking, with candidates crisscrossing the state in person rather than relying solely on national ad campaigns. Now to two states where Republicans are favored, but not completely safe. Iowa has Republicans at 54.26% and Democrats at 45.74%, and are +8.5 margin, with a 97.6% chance for the GOP. Iowa has shifted steadily Republican over the past decade, voting for Trump twice and re-electing Republican Senator Chuck Grassley in 2022 by double digits. Still, Democrats could see some movement here if the national environment swings heavily in their favor. North Carolina is closer, with Republicans at 51.02% and Democrats at 48.98%, and are +2 margin, giving the GOP a 69% win probability. North Carolina often delivers nail-biter races for statewide office. Democrats will need to energize turnout in urban centers like Charlotte and Raleigh while cutting into Republican margins in rural areas to have a chance. Finally, a few states have narrower numbers but are still expected to stay in their current party's column. Maine currently leans Republican in the model, with the GOP at 51.88% and Democrats at 48.12%, and our plus 3.8 margin, and an 80.9% chance for a Republican win. This is notable because Maine traditionally leans blue in federal races, but its Senate contests have a history of favoring moderate Republicans. Virginia has Democrats ahead 52.78% to Republicans 47.22%, a D plus 5.6 margin, and a 90.4% chance for the Democrats. Virginia has shifted toward Democrats in recent federal elections, thanks to growth in the Northern Virginia suburbs. New Mexico shows Democrats at 53.74% to Republicans 46.26%, a D plus 7.5 margin, with a 95.5% likelihood of staying blue. New Mexico's demographics and recent voting history make a Republican win here very unlikely without a major political shift. With so few true battlegrounds, Georgia, Michigan, and New Hampshire, the path to control is narrow for both sides. Republicans need to hold their likely states and flip just one battleground to be in a strong position for the majority. Democrats need to sweep all three and defend every other seat to regain control. Control of the Senate will decide which legislation advances, how judicial nominations are handled, and potentially the balance of the Supreme Court. That's why both parties are already focusing their money, messaging, and manpower on these key races. As we get closer to Election Day, these numbers will change, but the fundamentals are already clear. The 2026 Senate map is small in terms of competitive states, but high in stakes. We'll be following every poll, fundraising update, and major campaign development right here on Election Zone. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss our deep dive into voter registration trends, which could decide exactly how these close races break.